Buying your first home in the Toronto area can just feel straight up overwhelming at times. You have confusing rules, you have weird fees, and a system that often feels stacked against you. And if you don't really fully understand how this process works, especially here in the greater Toronto area, you could lose money, waste your time, or worse, you could just straight up buy the wrong home. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the home buying process from start to finish, from saving your down payment, getting pre-approved, finding the right home, and closing the deal. And you're going to want to stick around until the end because I'm going to show you the #1 mistake that first-time home buyers make when they're purchasing their first home. If we haven't met, my name is Mike. I'm a local realtor here in the GTA, and on this channel and specifically in this video, my goal is to help you as a first-time home buyer come out of this feeling very confident about purchasing your first home. So without further ado, let's get started with phase 1. Phase 1 is building your financial foundation, and while this won't be a heavy finance video, I did want to point out a couple of strategies that buyers are using, especially first-time buyers, to purchase a property in the greater Toronto area. And really this applies to anywhere in Ontario or any other province across Canada. The issue for a lot of buyers is that they do have the household income in order to purchase a property, but they don't have the down payment, especially in the GTA because of the prices here. So people are using these strategies in order to help them buy a home or their first home. So let's look at a couple of different accounts. So let's start with our TFSA. This is our tax-free savings account. The yearly contribution limit is $7,000, and at the time of recording this video, the lifetime total was $95,000, but that will grow every year. And if you've never opened a TFSA, then you'll be able to contribute up to that amount, whatever the maximum amount is. A lot of people will use this for longer planning, longer term planning, more sort of retirement planning, because everything can grow in here tax-free. However, for a lot of people, they will pull the money from here because it's tax-free when you remove it as well, because you're contributing after tax income into this account. So the TFSA is one of the methods that you can use to help pay your down payment. Next, we have the HPB. This is the home buyer's plan. This is part of your RRSP. In this one, you can now withdraw up to $60,000 per person tax-free. The difference between this one and the TFSA is you have to repay this over a certain amount of time. And in this case, it's 15 years. And the reason for that is that you are able to deduct the money that you put into your RSP from your income taxes, whereas the TFSA is after tax income. So you've already paid tax on that, on those funds. So you do need to repay the HPB. And finally, we have the first home savings account, the FHSA. I have to say that really slowly. It's always a hard one for me. This is kind of a combination between the RSP and the TFSA. You have a yearly contribution limit of $8,000 and a lifetime total of $40,000 for the purchase of your first home. That's it. That's all it can be used for. Whereas the RSP and of course the TFSA are much more flexible. Well, the home buyer's plan is specific to buying your first home as well, but your general RRSP is more flexible. The first home savings account is only meant for purchasing your first home. Again, this is similar to the RRSP in that you can deduct it from your income for tax purposes, but like a TFSA, it will grow tax-free. And when you withdraw the money from there, you do not need to repay this. This is only meant for buying your first home. So again, this is not a finance video, and I'm going to leave some links in the description for more education on this, but you really want to contact someone who specializes in this, from financial consulting, financial advice, tax accountant, to come up with strategies to best come up with the down payment for this home. But if we look at it, right, we have our TFSA. Let's put that aside. Let's just look at the HPB and the first home savings account. For each person, you have $60,000 tax-free in the home buyer's plan. So that's $120,000 between two people. And for the first home savings account, you've got $40,000 lifetime between two people. So that's $80,000. Between those two, $200,000, which is a great down payment for a home. Even in the greater Toronto area, that is an amazing down payment. So we'll look at that next. So when it comes to the minimum down payment needed, it's a bit of a tiered structure. So let's assume a purchase price of $600,000 in our scenario, and the minimum down payment needed on the first $500,000 of that amount is 5%. So 5% on the first $500,000 is $25,000. After that, it's 10%. So 10% is the minimum above 500,000. So everything above 500,000, you're going to need a minimum of 10%. So 10% on the next 100,000 is 10,000. So obviously between those two, at a purchase price of 600,000, your minimum down payment is 35,000. So a lot of people think, well, I only need 5% on 600,000, or sometimes people think, well, I need 10% on 600,000. It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of a combination. So it's a tiered structure. So your minimum down payment on 600,000 would be 35,000. Now, what next comes up is, well, what does that mean in terms of mortgage insurance premiums? So looking at this chart, essentially what a mortgage insurance premium is this is when you have less than 20% down, premium is added to insure this mortgage. And we have between 5% to 10%, the premium rate is 4%. So if you are buying a $600,000 home, $22,600 is going to be added to that mortgage over the course of over 25 or 30 years, depending upon your amortization length. And then as you can see, 10 to 15%, it's a 3.1% premium that's added. 15 to 19.99% is 2.8%. And of course, 20% or more, there is no premium added. So mortgage insurance is going to be added. This premium is going to be added to your mortgage if you have less than 20% down. But there were some big rule changes that happened in 2024 that have made things more affordable for especially first-time homebuyers. So in the past, $1 million was the absolute maximum that you could get an insured mortgage. So anything above $999,999, anything $1 million and above was subject to a 20% minimum down payment because that mortgage would not be insured. But that was a huge issue, especially in the Greater Toronto area, because while people had the household income for $1 million purchase, they just didn't have the down payment. So the government of Canada made a big rule change at the end of 2024, and now insured mortgages can go up to 1.5 million. So if you want to purchase a home that's 1.2 million, for example, you don't need to have 20% down anymore. You just need the minimum down payment. The other big change was the amortization length. So in the past, if you have an insured mortgage, you were capped out at 25 years. So the mortgage could only be stretched over 25 years, which of course would lead to a higher payment, monthly payment. So to make that more affordable for especially first-time home buyers, now you can get a 30-year amortization even if you have an insured mortgage, which makes the monthly payment more affordable for people. So that was another thing, those two big changes that happened to make homes more affordable for people to purchase, especially within the GTA. And this will be the last part of phase one, building your financial foundation. We're going to talk about some saving strategies that people use in order to simulate home ownership. So we're not talking about cutting out lattes or avocado toast or any of that stuff. This is going to be a way to actually test to see if you're ready to purchase a home. So what a lot of people will do is what's called the future mortgage payment method. And so let's say that you are either living at home or renting a place. Let's say scenario A, you're living at home. You're not having to pay anything, but the mortgage that you are looking to get into, so the home that you're looking to purchase, the monthly mortgage and carrying costs around $4,000. You're going to put aside that $4,000. You're not going to touch that $4,000. That is going to be your mortgage payment. You can't use it for anything else. Or if you're renting, let's say you're spending $2,500 per month in rent at the moment, you're going to put aside $1,500 per month. You're not going to touch that for anything else. It does two things. A, you have a bunch of savings at the end of 6 months or a year. And B, you know what it feels like to actually put aside or spend that $4,000. You know what that mortgage payment now feels like. That is a great way to not only boost your savings, but to simulate what it feels like to put that money towards mortgage. The other thing that you could do, you could consider buying an investment property first if you're renting cheap or living at home. So for a lot of people, if you're again renting something extremely cheap, you got it under $2,000, you got this great deal, and it's rent controlled, and you never really want to move out of it, but you know you want to be in the market, then you could consider purchasing an investment property and renting it out. That obviously comes with, its other set of risks and being a landlord landlord, but if you want to get into the market, then you can continue to rent and live in your place for cheap. And now you're in the market and you're either breaking even or cash flowing. And then when you're ready to actually move into the property, you have an easier time of doing that. You have a home that you can move into rather than having to deal with whatever is happening in the market at that time. So these are just two types of saving strategies that people will use that are not necessarily the most traditional, but they are a great way to show if you're actually ready to make a purchase. And just a really quick break here. If you're finding value in this video, please just hit the like button below. It will help more people to find content like this. That's it. Let's get right back to it. So phase two, this is probably the most important part of the early process, getting a mortgage pre-approval. I know the excitement of wanting to get out there right away and start looking at homes, but you need to take a step back and you need to work with your lender or a mortgage broker to really hone in on your affordability and actually get that pre-approval, because it helps narrow your search. This will get you into an actual realistic budget that you can afford. And at the time of this recording, we're in a buyer's market currently at the moment, let's say balance or buyer's market, but by the time you're ready to buy, it may have flipped. We may be in a seller's market, and having a pre-approval really makes you stronger in offers. If you're in a multiple offer situation, the seller is going to feel more confident with someone that can really prove that they have the funds to purchase the home. So getting a pre-approval is really important. Now, what does a lender actually check? What actually happens during this process? Okay, they're going to verify your income. They're going to verify your credit score. They're going to look at your debt to income ratio to show, well, yeah, you make this much money, but what can you actually afford based upon your debts? And then of course, they're going to verify your employment. And one thing I want to put out there to make sure you really understand is that when you do go to get a pre-approval, one hard credit check is not going to tank your score. A lot of people are really concerned about this because they feel like, if they do it and they don't go forward, it's going to really affect their credit score. One hard credit check is definitely not going to affect your score. So feel comfortable going ahead and going through that process. Next, we'll look at fixed versus variable rates. This is not going to be a rate discussion, but I just want to quickly lay out exactly what these are and the kind of the difference between them. A fixed rate is going to be predictable. You're going to have that same rate the entire time, no difference, right? You'll always pay that same rate, whereas a variable rate can go up or can go down. So there's a little bit more flexibility with a variable rate. You can win in some cases if the rate goes down over the course of your term, but there is the risk on the other side, especially most famously in 2022 when we had very low variable rates. All of a sudden they went up very quickly. So if you are, really wanting the predictability, go with fixed. If you are wanting a little bit more flexibility or willing to not gamble, but sort of take a little bit more risk, because historically a variable rate over the long term has worked out better than a fixed rate, but in the short term, it can be riskier when you have economic situations like we had back in 2022 and 2023. Now, in terms of terms and amortization, the difference is that the 3 and 5 year terms, so 1 year term, 2 year terms, 3 years, 5 years, this means that the rate that you're getting, whether fixed or variable, is over that amount of time, over those amount of years, and then you'll have to renew your mortgage. Whereas an amortization, the 25 or 30 year amortization, that means that the mortgage amount is going to be financed over that time period. So a shorter amortization period, the higher the payment is going to be monthly. The longer the amortization period, the smaller the payment is going to be, but there'll be more interest added. The longer the amortization, the more interest is added to your price of what you pay. So if you want to have more affordable payment, you want to stretch that out as long as you can. But again, in the long term, you'll be paying more for that same home. Next, we'll look at the stress test. The stress test is there, put in place by the lenders so that if, for example, on renewal, let's say you get a 3% rate, right? Or we'll use today's rates, closer to 4%. But by the time you renew, it's going to be a 6% fixed rate. Rates have really gone up. The lender makes sure that at the time that you get your mortgage, that term, that you can actually afford more than that. In case the rates have gone up, you can actually afford that. So you're stress tested is what it's called. And the same thing happens for a variable rate as well. And then one big piece of advice is once you've done this, do not, I implore you, do not make any big purchases, and please try your absolute best to to not switch jobs during this period, as that can definitely affect your pre-approval. And we'll take a look at that a little bit more closely as we go on to the next section. Phase 3, house hunting. This is typically the fun phase for people. This is what really gets them excited. Okay, so you're going to be doing some neighborhood scouting. You're going to want to work with an agent, obviously, that works in that area. Do not use someone that is from an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours away. They will just not know the schools. They will not know the transit. They'll not know the vibe. They'll not know the neighborhoods very well. They won't know where things are, and they will not be able to help you make a good decision for where to purchase within the community. Now, this next rule is one that is more specific to actually looking at houses themselves. So I have this rule, and this is a very famous rule that a lot of agents will use, is the out of 10 rule. So we're done. We've just seen a home. We walk out and I'll ask you, out of 10, what did you think of that home? But you cannot choose 7, because most people, they want to choose 7. If they don't really feel any great way about it, or it's a maybe, then they say 7. But people never buy a 7, right? So anything that is 6 and below, it means you're not going to purchase that property. That's just not going to happen. But if you feel that is an 8 and above, then you're more serious. There's definitely the possibility that you will purchase that home, and you'll think about it more closely. So when you're out and doing showings, think about it. Out of 10, was this house a 6? Was it a 5? I mean, you walk in, you'll know it's a 2, but was it an 8, right? Not every home needs to be a 10. And realistically speaking, most people don't find a home that fits every single criteria that they want or is absolutely perfect. Even for people that have a huge budget. You work with someone that has a $3 million budget, I absolutely guarantee you that that person will be like, man, if I just had $4 million, if I just had that extra 500,000, if I just had 3.5 million, I could get exactly what I wanted. And the same is true of someone who has a $500,000 budget or a $600,000 budget. They say the exact same thing. There's no difference where you are on the spectrum. If it's an 8 or above, look at it more seriously. It does not need to be a 10. And I reiterate this point because I know people, I've had clients who say, wow, this house is perfect. I'm going to live here forever. And the average person moves every 5 to 7 years. And after 2 years, I've walked into a home, met up with some clients, and they've said, you know what, we're ready to move again. And that was supposed to be their forever home. So if you're waiting for a forever home, I guarantee you there is no such thing as a forever home. It's very rare, at least in today's day and age, for people to have a forever home. So you do not need a 10 out of 10. Make sure that it's at least an 8 though, and you'll take it more seriously. Now, another big thing, please ignore the staging. You're going to walk into homes and you're going to see some beautiful homes and in terms of staging inside, but that is not going to be your furniture. You're not going to have it laid out that way. A lot of times people will have the staging where, it's laid out in a way where the TV doesn't make sense in this room. And, the vast majority of people want to have a TV in this room, or the staging is hiding certain things that they may not be looking at. You need to look past the paint. You need to look past the furniture, and you need to really focus on the layout. The layout is going to be the most important. The space is going to be the most important. And you really need to look at the bones of the home. What does not just literal foundation, but what is how does the roof look? How the windows look like? How well was this house kept up? The HVAC system, the central air conditioning. Are there cracks all over the literal foundation? Is the basement sort of a bit, musty? You walk into a place oftentimes and it can look great, but you look a little bit deeper and it's not so great. Or again, the staging looks like this perfect home, but when you take away all that furniture, all of a sudden the layout is not very functional. It doesn't really make sense for you specifically. It doesn't make it an 8 or a 9, and now makes it a 5 or a 6. And beyond the home, we're going to take a quick look at what market conditions are actually like when you're starting to purchase. So you want to get a better idea of what the market is like. You're going to want to look at these 3 things. So first is your days on market. This is telling you how fast homes are selling. So a days on market of 30. Typically that means that homes are taking 30 days on average to sell. So probably more of a balanced or a buyer's market. If homes are all selling under a week, well, there's probably multiple offers. It's a heated environment. It's a seller's market. So that is going to make for a more difficult time to purchase. And now let's take a look at months of inventory. So this is very important, another important metric for determining what kind of market that we're in. So to back up a little bit, months of inventory just means that if we have no new listings come to the market, we only look at our active listings. Let's say there's 1,000 of them, and we want to know how long would it take for these 1,000 homes to sell if we didn't add any more in. So let's say that there were 100 home sales last month. The way to calculate this number is to take the active listings divided by the number of home sales in the previous month. So 1,000 active listings divided by 100 home sales from last month. So we have 10 months of inventory, and 10 months of inventory would put us into a buyer's market, because as I said, there are three types of markets: a seller's market, which is between 0 to 3 months of inventory, a balanced market, which is between 4 to 6 months of inventory, and then a buyer's market, which is 6+ months of inventory. So 6 to whatever number. In this case, we have 10 months. So looking at this number, the months of inventory tells you immediately what's going on in the market. If we have 10 months of inventory, you're going to be able to negotiate. You're in a buyer's market. If we're in a balanced market, 4 to 6 months of inventory, you're going to be able to negotiate still, but you may not be able to negotiate as hard or get as much of a price reduction when you're buying as a buyer's market. And then obviously in a seller's market, it's going to be the opposite. You don't have that leverage. There aren't as many listings on the market, and if there are, they're selling really quickly. So that's a really important metric to look at as well. And the last thing you can look at is what's called the list to sale price ratio. So if we're listing at $1 million and the home sells for $1 million, then the list to sale price ratio was 100%. The home sold for 100% of what it was listed for. In very hot markets, sellers markets, typically the list to sale ratio will be above 100%, right? A lot of times people will list it for $999,999, but the home is really worth closer to 1.2 million. So there's multiple offers, and then it goes up and sells for 1.2 million. And then you might see a list price of 102%, right? So looking at that list to sale price ratio gives you, again, another indication of what is happening within the market. If we're seeing most of the homes sell for less than 100%, let's say the list to sale price ratio is 97 or 98%, that means that people are negotiating. So on $1 million home, if it sells for 970,000, well, the list to sale price ratio is 97%. So that will, again, give you another indication of what's happening in the market. All of these things will tell you what's happening. And what you actually want to do is ignore the list price entirely. You want to find out what is actually sold, specifically within the past 30 to 60 days within your budget. And you only want to look at what is sold within those 30 to 60 days, ideally as tight a window as possible to find out what is happening. You can stretch it out to 90 days if you have more of a larger budget or a more unique home or area or smaller market that you're looking at, but you really want to look at what is sold. Do not just look at list price. Okay, you finally made it. You found that 8 or 9 out of 10, and it's time to make an offer on the property. So we have 4 parts to an offer. We have price, deposit, closing date, and conditions. Price is pretty obvious. You're going to work with your agent to negotiate a price on this property. You've found out how much recent comparables have sold for over the past 30, 60, 90 days, and you feel confident with the price that you're going to offer for this home. And that will be negotiable between you and the seller. Next will be a deposit. So the seller is going to expect some kind of deposit for this home. If you agree to a deal, they want to make sure that there is some money that you're putting forward in order to guarantee that you will close on this home. So in the GTA, around 3 to 5% of the purchase price is typically expected of a deposit. So say $1 million purchase price, 30 to 50,000 as a deposit will be expected. And again, negotiable, but you should expect in and around that amount. Next, we have our closing date. So if you are, the seller wants a 30-day closing, but you want a 90-day closing, this is something that you need to negotiate. And, beyond price, closing date can oftentimes be where a deal can fall apart. So being able to negotiate a closing date is important. That seller may say, hey, you know what? I really need 30 days, but if you want 90 days, I want a little bit more money. I want $5,000 more, right? So your closing date can affect your price. These are not things that are looked at completely in isolation. Now, if you're in a seller's market and you just don't have the ability to close at the time that they want, and you're competing against another person, let's say that there's 2 offers. They're offering a closing date that is matching the seller's closing date, but you offer a higher price. Well, price doesn't always win out, right? Depending upon how much higher it is, the seller may really need to sell within that window, and they say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go with a lower price, but a better closing date. So a closing date can make a big difference in terms of an offer. And last but not least, this is a huge part of it as well. These are your conditions. So we typically look at 2 to 3 different conditions within an offer. This could be more, but we'll stick with the first 2 to 3 that are the most common. So first condition we have is the financing condition. Now, great, you've got your pre-approval already, but you still need to run this past your lender before you purchase the home. You're going to send them the agreement. They're going to do things like an appraisal. They're going to, make sure that everything is good to go. And over the course of a few business days, they're going to approve you for financing to purchase this home. During that time window, you will do what's called a home inspection. So you'll work with an inspector to go around the home and to discover and uncover any deficiencies that there may be within the home. And finally, if you're buying a condo, you'll have something that's called a status certificate. You're going to request the status certificate from the listing agent, or your buying agent may end up purchasing the status certificate themselves, or you may request it depending upon the market. So you're going to get a status certificate, and what this status certificate is essentially the financial health of the condo corporation that you're buying into. So it will lay out the health of it, the budget, how much money is in what's called the reserve fund, and also you will have the bylaws and the documents of the condo to show you what you can and can't do. You are going to review this, but more importantly, your lawyer is going to review this. They are going to make sure and give you the okay that the financial health of the condo is okay, and it has enough money in case of any large repairs that need to be done. So for example, if you purchase a condo, but they do not have a lot of money in the reserve fund, and then all of a sudden something large breaks and there's not enough money to pay for that, what can happen is a special assessment. That means that each unit owner then has to give X amount of dollars to help pay for this repair. And this can be a very expensive amount. This can be $5, $10, $15, $20,000 that you're expected to come up with, oftentimes not with a payment plan, in order to give to the condo corporation. So a status certificate is an extremely important condition, and you must have that reviewed and be part of your offer. If you are not getting a status certificate, that is a big red flag. So make sure that you definitely want to review that. So overall, 4 parts to an offer from a high level. These are the things that you will be negotiating and figuring out before you firm up on that home. 2 more things that you just need to know before we move on is, first, the irrevocable period. How long is this offer good for? 24 hours, 48 hours, a month? How long do we make this offer available to the seller? Again, it depends upon the market and what's happening, if there's multiple offers, all that stuff. But generally speaking, 24 hours is what is expected for an offer to be available to the seller. They could do one of 3 things. They can either accept the offer as it is, they can counter the offer so they can make any changes and send it back to you, or they could reject it. Typically, a seller won't reject an offer unless it's completely lowballed, like it's $1 million listing price and you've offered $600,000. They're probably just going to ignore it. But generally speaking, they will counter your offer, send it back to you, and then there will be another irrevocable period. They'll give you 24 hours to then respond. So number 2, expect a negotiation. This is not something where you put your first offer in and it's going to be accepted right away. Very, very rarely, unless you are offering everything that they want, right? No conditions, the closing date that they want, a high deposit, and the price that they want. Then, okay, there's no negotiation. But in a buyer's market or in a more balanced market, you're going to want to expect a negotiation. So there will be a little bit of back and forth, and it may take a day or 2 or 3 days, sometimes a week, to actually get an offer done on the home that you're looking to buy. Okay, we've made it. We've purchased the home. Everything was done. We got the price that we wanted. We got the closing date. It's a 60-day closing and we're ready to move. So what do we need to know now? What's the closing process like? Well, first we need to take a step back and say, okay, well, there's some closing costs here that are going to happen on this property. The biggest of which is your land transfer tax. So if you look at the image here, our land transfer tax, known as our LTT, this is what everyone pays. Every buyer pays when they purchase a home within Ontario. If you're in another province watching this, you'll have your own land transfer tax potentially, but this is meant for Ontario viewers. The LTT on 600,000 is a tiered structure again. So 0.5% on the first 55,000, yada, yada, yada. There are land transfer tax calculators where you can take the purchase price and you can just plug it right into this calculator and it's going to spit out the number for you to make it a lot easier. But just know this is how it breaks down. So when you purchase a property at $600,000, your Ontario land transfer tax, what you need to pay on closing to the government, is going to be $8,475. Now, if you're buying your first home though, that will be a little bit different. And if you're buying a home in Toronto, it will also be a little bit different. First, let's start with Toronto. If you're going to be purchasing a home in the city of Toronto, it is the only city in Ontario, the only municipality that has a double land transfer tax. So you are not just paying the Ontario land transfer tax, you are paying the Toronto Toronto land transfer tax as well. And it's the same calculation. So whatever your number is, in this case, $8,475, you're going to double that. That is how much you'll be paying on closing to purchase a home in Toronto. So not all bad news, okay? For first-time home buyers, we do have rebates. The first-time home buyer rebate in Ontario for the Ontario land transfer tax is $4,000, and the rebate on the Toronto LTT is $4,475. So taking a look at this calculation, if we have a $600,000 purchase price, we're going to have an $8,475 cost, right? As a homeowner or as the buyer, you're going to deduct $4,000 from that. You're going to get a rebate and you're going to owe $4,475. So as a first timer, you save quite a bit, right? You save $4,000. And if you're a first timer buying in Toronto, you're going to save an additional $4,475. However, it's a double land transfer tax, right? So that $8,475 times that by 2, and then the numbers kind of are a little bit confusing here, but you're going to have an $8,475 rebate as well. So it works out that you have an $8,475 tax bill owed at the end of it. So if you're anywhere else in Ontario on a $600,000 purchase, you will pay $4,475. And if you are buying in Toronto at $600,000, you're going to owe $8,475 as a first-time home buyer. If you're not a first-time home buyer and you're watching this, unfortunately, you are going to be paying double tax, and there are no rebates to reduce it. Okay. Next, we'll look at some other closing costs that you're going to want to save up for. So besides the land transfer tax, the largest fee after that is going to be your lawyer fees and your closing documents. This is going to be around $1,500 to $2,500. Please don't skimp out on a good lawyer. This will be very, very important. There's not a huge fluctuation between fees. Most of this has to do with like title insurance and disbursements and other sort of miscellaneous fees. Now, next you'll have a home inspection. Again, a great investment. Do not skip out on a home inspection. This will be the best $400 to $500 or $600 you're going to spend, because it could save you from literal financial ruin if you purchase the wrong kind of home. You go in and they discover some big deficiency that you didn't know about, you're able to walk away from that offer. And similar to the status certificate, it's only $100 to $150, and this is actually generally covered by either the listing or your agent in this case, depending upon the market. But the status certificate is extremely important. As I mentioned before, this will need to be reviewed by the lawyer, and it's a very small cost. Now, appraisals, these are again usually paid by the lender. This may happen. So overall, you're going to want to budget for, I would say, about 1.5% of the purchase price for closing costs. But this does not include furniture. This does not include moving costs. That is a whole different bucket that you're going to want to save for. Not so much the moving costs, but more so the furniture costs. When people move to their first home or move to a new home, usually they want to buy new furniture or new appliances or things like that. So just closing costs themselves, you're going to want to budget about 1.5%. And a couple of quick things to know just before we move on. There are these things called adjustments. Now, on closing, you may owe the seller for prepaid taxes or condo fees. So for example, if you're closing and it's September and they've already paid the property taxes for the year, well, there's going to be an adjustment on closing because they've paid for already September to December, which you are responsible for. Or the same thing with maintenance fees. It's midway through the month, it's the 15th when you're closing, but they've already paid the maintenance fees for the month. Well, you're going to owe that on closing. So these kind of adjustments will be made, and there will be a statement of adjustments that your lawyer will provide to you to show you exactly how that's all going to work. More importantly, don't forget to set up your utilities before closing. There have been situations where a buyer has gone into a home and they've had no gas in the middle of winter because they did not realize they needed to set up their utilities before they moved in. So make sure you have all of that done at least a week or two before. You've contacted all the different utility companies to set those up so you don't have a situation like that. And one thing I also really want to point out is the true cost of ownership. Besides closing costs, besides the mortgage is just the start. You have property taxes. That is going to have to be paid twice per year in installments. Now, some people will roll those into their mortgage, so that can kind of take that financial, at least, equation out of it. But for other people, you're going to be paying this separately. So that is part of it. You need to look at the property taxes, right? When you're looking at which city to move to. You're going to want to look at the tax rates of each city. Some are more expensive than others. Home insurance. You need home insurance for your property. If you are buying somewhere that's unfortunately in a floodplain because you didn't check it out, insurance could be was definitely going to be higher for that property. So you're going to want to look at that and budget for that cost as well. Maintenance fees. So you're looking at the purchase price, $600,000. We're buying a condo, but we don't really look at the maintenance fees. What are the maintenance fees? They're $600 or they're $1,000. We need to look at them per month. Like that could be a huge difference, right? $400 difference per month. So you need to definitely take a look at those. And then of course we have repairs. This is more so for a freehold home where there are going to be repairs in every home. And they may come in waves, they may come all at once, they may come once a year. You're gonna wanna budget for these and definitely have an understanding that there will be repairs. So the mortgage is just the start of the cost of owning a home. So let's take a look at that a little bit more closely, a freehold versus a condo and what that means for you as a buyer. Freeholds, there's no fees, but you're going to have unexpected repair bills, definitely. So there are no fees for the property, there's no maintenance fees whatsoever. Condos, they have monthly maintenance fees, but very, very few unexpected repairs. If you're not getting hit with a special assessment, then you're typically just repairing things cosmetically. Maybe you want new floors, maybe you want new appliances, but those all apply for things that happen in a freehold home as well. So it's kind of a trade-off, right? Are you paying your monthly maintenance fees or are you saving up and paying for new windows and a new roof and a new garage door? Now we have what's called a freehold townhome and a condo townhome that kind of mixes both a little bit. So in a freehold townhome, of course, we have no fees whatsoever, but in a condo townhome, you're going to have maintenance fees. Now, the level of maintenance fees or the amount of maintenance fees will depend upon the complex. So you will find some condo townhome complexes where they cover the roof and the windows and the garage door. They cover everything on the exterior and you're only responsible for the interior. So you've got to pay for a new furnace or a new air conditioner. But there are also the concept of what's called a common element condo. So it has the characteristics of a freehold townhome. You may have seen this when you're like searching for a home. You'll see that it's marketed as freehold, but there's $100 or maybe $150, $200 per month fee. And that only takes care of the common elements. So the roads. So someone comes and plows the roads, or the landscaping. Someone comes and cuts your backyard grass or your front yard grass. And there may be a playground on the complex. Well, there's insurance to insure that playground in case anybody falls and gets hurt. So that's what's called a common element townhome, but it will often be marketed as a freehold townhome, but it's not quite that. It is still technically a condo, and none of the structure is covered. You got to pay for your own roof. You have to pay for your own windows, everything. So just like a freehold, you're responsible for everything. And this condo fee pays for what all the unit owners share together. And this is a very, very common type of housing type now. Most homes that are built within the Greater Toronto area are actually now common element townhomes. So you're going to see a lot of newer homes that are going to have this small monthly fee. And just like a condo, those fees do go up. So you're going to want to budget for those fees to increase as well. And you know what? One more point on that, you may find that there's a water heater rental, like a tankless rental. Oftentimes especially new construction, there'll be this will already be negotiated into the agreement between the company that supplies the hot water tank and the builder. So you're taking on a rental contract of $70, $80 per month, and there's no real way out of that at the moment. So that can also go up. So if you wanted to own your own water tank, it may not be possible in some new developments, or you're buying a home and there's a rental contract for the water heater. That's another point of negotiation. If you're in a buyer's market, hey, seller, pay that tank off. I don't want that. I want my own tank in that I own. But if you're in a seller's market, well, you've got multiple offers you're competing against. Oftentimes you're going to be taking on that contract now. So that's an extra $70, potentially $80 per month. Combine that with a condo, with a common element fee, you're looking at around potentially $200 to $300 a month in extra costs that you didn't necessarily have before, or if you're buying a different type of home. So you're going to want to keep those kinds of things in mind. And this is something that I'm kind of reiterating from my last point, but you're going to want to have the long-term planning of budgeting for maintenance, whether that's a freehold home or a condo. You're going to want to budget for things that can happen to the home. Job changes happen, life curveballs happen. Make sure you have that emergency fund before you purchase, and always have a home repair fund. Something can happen, you don't have the cash for it. What are you going to do? You need a new roof, it's leaking. You need new windows. People will go years without new windows, but that's going to increase your utilities, right? So have these things things together. There are sort of mortgage types. There are types of mortgages where the principal that you pay down on your mortgage starts a line of credit, and then you can actually borrow from that line of credit from the principal you pay down to pay for a home repair fund. Speak with your mortgage broker, your lender, about those types of programs to help you. But either way, long-term planning, true cost of ownership are really, really important and are all things that should be planned before you purchase a home. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope it delivered value for you. And as promised, the number one mistake that home buyers make that I see, in my opinion, and I've already alluded to in this video if you were paying attention, is that they do not plan for anything more than just the monthly payment. There is so much more to owning a home than just your monthly mortgage payment. And if there's anything that you take out of this video, is to take away that you need to make sure that you understand the true cost of home ownership before you get into it, because there are many situations that I see personally where people buy and a year or two later, they are just sick of it. They want to get out of it. They're not ready for it. So make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. You've watched this video and you can jump back from point to point to make sure that you understand everything. And when you're ready to purchase, reach out to an experienced agent like myself who can help you purchase your first home in the Greater Toronto area. I sincerely hope this helped clear things up for you. If you found it valuable, please just hit like below or subscribe for more real estate videos like this. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, please drop a comment below, or you can reach out to me directly. I check all of my messages, all of the comments as well, and I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, happy house hunting, or I'll see you on the next video.